And thousands of businesses right across metropolitan Melbourne are beginning their final day of trading before the strict lockdown begins at midnight tonight. Across the city, services including retail, hairdressing, household cleaning and lawn mowing will be shut down for 6 weeks from tonight. Construction too will be limited.
Overnight, details have been released of new permits required for workers in essential jobs to be allowed to move around the city. Schools also return to full remote learning from today. The lockdown is expected to hit the economy hard, and retail giant Wesfarmers is already lobbying for an exemption for its 168 Victorian stores. Steph Ferrier is in Melbourne. Good morning, Steph. Well, police have now said the grace period is over for those who don't comply with these new restrictions.
Yes, good morning, Lisa. Well, the screws are really tightening for those people who choose to flout these coronavirus restrictions, with the Police Chief Commissioner Shane Patton saying that that window of discretion is now virtually closed. Now, fines have been tripled to almost $5,000 for people who breach quarantine, and for repeat offenders, police can detain them and then take them to court, where the fines can jump up to $20,000. Now, this follows the recent door knocking of 3,000 homes of COVID-positive people, and disturbingly, 800 of them weren't at home. Now, the Premier Daniel Andrews says that this is completely unacceptable. He's now removed the excuse of exercising for people to be out from their quarantine. He says they'll have to get their fresh air from their front windows, and he says they'll be subjected to random repeated door knocks, which will be boosted by an extra 500 Australian Defence Force personnel. Now, Shane Patton, the Chief Commissioner, says that there will also be an extra 250 police officers as well in this enforcement effort. He says that there's been a bit of a trend of people calling themselves sovereign citizens who are thinking that they are above the law and taking the law into their own hands, basically doing what they want. He says that in a couple of occasions they've had to actually smash car windows at vehicle checkpoints because these people inside have refused to obey directions. And he says in one of the most disgusting acts, a 26-year-old female police officer has been seriously assaulted by a 38-year-old woman from Frankston in Melbourne's southeastern suburbs on Monday night. When the police officer went up and challenged her as to why she wasn't wearing a mask, this woman then pushed her to the ground and repeatedly smashed her head into the concrete.
I've spoken to the member yesterday afternoon. She's at home on a couple of days off. She had concussion, had her hair pulled out, but alarmingly was subjected to an attack that escalated from nothing. She's in as good a spirits as you would expect her to be, but nonetheless taken aback by the unprovoked attack on her.
A truly horrible incident there, and this woman now faces several charges, including recklessly causing serious injury and assaulting emergency workers.
And of course, all eyes on the fact that the retail restrictions come into effect today. So many places are going to be shutting their doors. Sadly, many of them are saying that they won't be reopening them in 6 weeks.
That's right. It's real heartbreak for many business owners and workers, of course, who are now just about to start their last full day of normal operations before this Melbourne-wide enforced business shutdown begins at midnight tonight. Now, we're expecting, of course, to see probably quite a last-minute rush from customers trying to get those supplies before the doors do shut for 6 weeks, as well as business owners scrambling to try to move as much of their businesses online as possible if they can. But of course, entire industries are going to be shut down, and we're going to see many businesses potentially thrown to the wall and as a result of this, and also a $5 billion hit to the economy as a result of this lockdown. Now, this is going to result in around 250,000 non-essential workers either working from home or being stood down, and they'll be removed from circulation around the community, which means that we'll now have 1 million workers not out on the streets or in shops, for example. But for those essential workers, who continue to work, they will now have to get a permit. There'll be a new permit system which will be signed off by employers. The forms are online now, and that will allow them to show those to police if they're pulled over or asked why they're out of their homes.
Yeah, all right, Steph, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
The Prime Minister says subsidies will be paid to childcare centres in Melbourne during the latest phase of the coronavirus restrictions. The Commonwealth was forced to start urgent discussions with the childcare sector following the Victorian Premier's announcement. Mr Morrison says further sustainment payments will be made to childcare centres so they can stay open and, importantly, keep their employees.
Parents will not lose any of their places in childcare. We'll continue to pay the subsidies to those childcare facilities for those places.
Queensland says it will close a COVID quarantine loophole involving consular and diplomatic staff returning to the state. It comes after a man who returned from Afghanistan last week tested positive after flying to the Sunshine Coast and driving to Toowoomba. He'd been granted diplomatic exemptions to bypass hotel quarantine, but it's since been revealed he was not a consular official. The Department of Foreign Affairs says it did not support an exemption for the man and was unaware it had been sought or even granted.
New coronavirus restrictions have come into effect in South Australia as health authorities there attempt to curb a possible second wave. From today, pubs, bars and restaurants can only serve seated guests and home gatherings are restricted to only 10 people. The state government hasn't ruled out further restrictions after recording 9 cases in 10 days. The Immigration Detention Centre on Christmas Island is being reopened because COVID-19 restrictions have made deportations difficult. International border closures and reduced flights have seen immigration detention centres around the country fill up. Border Force says detainees being transferred to Christmas Island are convicted criminals and not asylum seekers.
The World Health Organization is urging Russia to follow established guidelines for producing safe and effective vaccines after Moscow announced plans to start mass vaccination against the coronavirus in October. Russia's health minister says a vaccine developed at one of the country's research facilities will receive approval this month. Meanwhile, Turkey's new coronavirus cases have passed 1,000 per day for the first time in 3 weeks. And New York City's health commissioner has resigned over what she's called a deeply disappointing response to the pandemic. New York has had more than 23,000 deaths and 231,000 cases.
And Rafael Nadal is the latest tennis star to pull out of the US Open. The world number 2 is concerned about attending during the coronavirus pandemic, saying on Twitter, "It looks like we still don't have control of it." Organisers are disappointed he won't be there to defend his title next month. 5-time US Open champ Roger Federer is also out with a knee injury, leaving Novak Djokovic as the favourite at this stage.